Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button. Nearing 200 subscribers. Would love to hit that number by training camp. Speaking of training camp, that's what everyone's waiting for, right? I keep saying that at the beginning of most of these videos, but we're patiently awaiting the start of training camp for the Packers. It's about a week away. I guess it depends when you watch this video. I've seen a lot of chatter in the last couple of weeks on Packers social channels, not the Packers directly, but with content creators, and people who cover the team on the beat reporters, discussing who the most important player on the Packers is. Not who the best player on the Packers is, but who the most important is. And typically I fall in line with the theory that if you can't get the quarterback spot right, you really don't have a shot in the NFL. Like, you just don't. You got to get it right at quarterback. And I've always been a proponent. You know, the Packers really haven't had to deal with this for the last, 3 decades? But I've always been a believer in just keep taking swings. Like, if you don't get it right, don't try to force it to be right if it's not going to be, and just keep taking hacks. Like, with all due respect to some of the Bears' selections, like, I look at Mitchell Trubisky, and I think they just held on a little bit too long when it was clear that, like, Trubisky wasn't going to be the answer, where I'm just like, just keep getting into the batter's box and take another swing in another draft. And a lot of teams just try to cling on too long to a quarterback that it's very apparent to everyone else isn't going to be a quarterback that can elevate your team, your franchise to a Super Bowl level. And that's the goal for everyone, or at least it should be. And so when I'm talking today about who I think the most important Packers player is, I don't mind those who just get in line and say it's Jordan Love because of the position that he plays. And I get all of that. And Jordan Love might be the most important player for the Green Bay Packers, and it might be foolish to suggest someone else, but I am going to play the role of contrarian today and offer up another option. And the player I'm going to bring to the table when you talk about the most important player on this team for 2025 is Josh Jacobs. That's the argument I want to present today, and I'm going to try to win over some of you, many of you, most of you, who probably just settle in with Jordan Love being the idea. And again, I'm not saying how am I going to say a running back is better than a quarterback and we're going to try to cross-compare positions and value and things of that nature. I am fine with those who say Jordan Love's the most important player because quarterback's the most important position. And I believe that too, to an extent. I am just offering up Josh Jacobs as another option. And I think there is logic and statistical evidence and proof that blends together well enough where Josh Jacobs can be a really good answer to that question as well. And first off, I do wonder this. If not for Josh Jacobs' efforts in 2024, you're talking about an offense that might be trending towards woeful. What were the issues that were brought up with the Packers offense down the stretch run of the regular season and even in that playoff loss to Philadelphia? Wasn't Josh Jacobs in the running game. It was the passing game. And it's not just Jordan Love. It's, LaFleur's lumped in there. It's drops by the wide receivers. It's inconsistency in the passing game as a whole. It's not just Jordan Love. He doesn't, carry all of that burden on his shoulders. A lot of times when things are going right for a passing game in an offense, the quarterback will get all the praise, just like when things are going south and not going well, the quarterback will get all of that finger pointing too. Logically, though, I think you can look at the passing game for the Packers in 2024 and come to a pretty strong conclusion that a lot of the inefficiencies we saw weren't just with Jordan Love. But again, circling back, if not for the efforts of Josh Jacobs, what does that offense look like last year? I mean, you're all of a sudden looking at a team that is really, really leaning on its defense to do the lion's share of the work for you to be successful. I look at numbers last year for Josh Jacobs that I think shine a light on his true impact. I'm looking at a running back in Josh Jacobs, and I look league-wide. There was not another back in the entire National Football League that had a higher percentage of yards after contact than Josh Jacobs. Pretty simple statistic. How many yards did you gain after your first contact made with a defender? Doesn't matter if it's in the backfield, after you get through the first layer, second layer. Yards after contact. Josh Jacobs. I almost said Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs' number in that category. Percentage of yards after contact. Finished at 78.2%. So again, Josh Jacobs, his total yards gained, 78.2% of those total yards came after he was contacted by a defender. Tops in the NFL. Showed that he's good at shedding tackles. Also showed that Packers offensive line, which I thought pretty good last year, if they struggled at any point in time, often came in the ground game instead of pass protection. Did a pretty good job of keeping Jordan Love upright, or Malik Willis, who started a couple of games, filled in for half of two other games, Jacksonville and the regular season finale against Chicago. And to put that number in better perspective, because I can sit here and tell you, hey, Josh Jacobs led the league in percentage of yards after contact, 78.2. Well, who was second best? What was that number? Bijan Robinson of Atlanta was second in that same category. His number was 63.2%. So Josh Jacobs, percentage of yards after contact, nearly 15% higher than the guy who came in second. And it was a trend that continued throughout the playoffs. You can look at Josh Jacobs' game against Philadelphia and say, he only had 81 yards rushing. I almost said 40. He had 40 yards receiving in that game, which was good for second. Show his sort of all-around impact that he makes on the offense. But Josh Jacobs had 81 yards rushing against Philadelphia in that wild card round loss. 74 came after contact. He forced a dozen missed tackles against a pretty damn good Philadelphia defense. Look at what they did eating up the offensive line of Kansas City in the Super Bowl in February in New Orleans. Again, Josh Jacobs against that same defense had 81 yards rushing, had the only touchdown for the Green Bay Packers in that game. And 74 of the 81 yards came after he was first contacted by a defender. Dude's a monster. Packers have a good offensive line. Could have been better in the ground game. If not for the excellence of Josh Jacobs and his ability to shake off would-be tacklers, we're probably looking at this offensive line in a little bit of a different light. Green Bay clearly thought that they needed to address it. Bringing in Aaron Banks in free agency, drafting Anthony Belton in the second round out of North Carolina State. And you can put aside certain numbers if you want. If you look at it and you're like, hey, Josh Jacobs, yeah, a lot of yards after contact. Highest percentage in the NFL. We get it. But what other numbers tell the tale of the tape? How about the fact that Green Bay ran it 50.6% of the time total? So they ran it a little more than half the time of their total plays called on offense and ran and executed or not executed in 2024. And most of those 50.6% runs, a large share of them was turning around and putting the pigskin right in the lap of Josh Jacobs. And Josh Jacobs finished the season 6th in rushing attempts, 6th in rushing yards, and had a career-high 15 rushing touchdowns. Josh Jacobs was so damn good this year, such a large piece of the equation, answer, solution for this offense, that it is impossible to not wonder, man, if not for his excellence, I think the other word I used earlier, his brilliance, what does this offense really look like in 2024? Because we saw the roller coaster ride that was the passing game. And you look at all these numbers, Green Bay ran it 50.6% of the time. And if you want that number to be given some perspective, that was the third highest mark in the entire NFL. Green Bay, percentage of plays ran at 50.6, was it? 50.4, whatever I said, 50.6% of the time. That trailed only Baltimore and Philadelphia, who have Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, and two pretty damn good offensive lines. And keep in mind, I'm talking about Baltimore running it more. You know, they ran it more than any team. I think they were 1, Philly was 2, and then Green Bay was 3. They also have Lamar Jackson, who is a true dual threat. Jalen Hurts, a true dual threat. Jordan Love uses the arm far more than he uses the legs. Yet the Packers finished third in percentage of plays ran. That came via the ground game, 50.6. A lot of them going to Josh Jacobs, who, again, I said 6th in the NFL in rushing attempts, 6th in rushing yards, 15 rushing touchdowns were a career high. Green Bay is not going to be going in some opposite direction in 2025. They added to the offensive line. They hope Aaron Banks can help that unit up front in the ground game. They hope Anthony Belt maybe will have some contributions made. Maybe he'll just be a depth piece as a rookie. But Green Bay took what I thought was a decent offensive line and said, we're going to make it even better. We're going to make it even easier for Josh Jacobs and Jordan Love. Protect him even more. And if you look at some of the individual games last year, again, the Packers finished, was it 11-6, and one game ahead of Seattle for that last wild card spot, who finished 10-7. But really it was 2 because they had the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Seahawks. But you look at some individual games. Week 2 win over Indianapolis. Jordan Love gets hurt on the second-to-last play. Week 1 in Brazil against Philadelphia. MCL injury, misses the next 2 games. Malik Willis came in those 2 games against the Colts and the Tennessee Titans, and he played his role very, very well. Malik Willis showed like, oh, not only is he a damn good backup quarterback, this is a dude that maybe somewhere down the road gets another nod as a starting quarterback. Isn't going to come in Green Bay unless Jordan Love gets hurt, but maybe somewhere else. So Malik Willis did his job. This is not a knock on him. But in that Week 2 win over Indianapolis, the Packers were without Jordan Love. Green Bay threw it a grand total of 14 times in a 16-10 win over the Indianapolis Colts. Why did they only throw it 14 times? Because all they had to lean on was Josh Jacobs. Jacobs had 32 rushes for 151 yards, single-handedly at times, kept drives alive, kept the chains moving for Matt LaFleur's offense. Malik Willis shined in his role. But if not for Jacobs, Green Bay is likely staring down the barrel of a loss instead of a win in Week 2 against Indianapolis. You look at a Week 8 win over Jacksonville. That came down to the wire. Green Bay wins a nail-biter 30-27. Looks like they controlled most of the game, and then Jacksonville makes a late push, and Josh Jacobs makes sure that Green Bay wins that game. Malik Willis comes in the second half for an injured Jordan Love, finishes that game under center for Green Bay. The Packers passed it 27 times in that win against the Jags. Meanwhile, Josh Jacobs had, again, 27 passes total between Willis and Love. Josh Jacobs in that game had 25 carries for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the Packers held off Jacksonville 30-27. Even in the playoff loss to Philadelphia, Love in the passing game, very inefficient. Jordan Love was 20 for 33, 212 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Josh Jacobs has 81 yards rushing, the lone Packers touchdown, as I mentioned earlier, second on the team with 40 receiving yards. Like, you need strong quarterback play to get to the top of the mountain in the NFL. There's no doubting that. Green Bay needs Josh Jacobs as much as anything else, right? Because, again, what I'm debating here is who's the most important player on the Packers. And it's easy to just check the box and say Jordan Love because he plays the most important position. The contributions made by Josh Jacobs in 2024, the reliance that will be had on him to repeat those performances, that excellence in 2025, there's a lot riding on the shoulders of Josh Jacobs because Green Bay is not going to stray away from the ground game. If this season comes and goes and the Packers pass it again as much as they run it, and I should flip that because my argument here is Josh Jacobs being the most important player on the roster. If they run it as much as they pass it, and that was a near 50-50 split in 2024, Josh Jacobs is going to have to be pretty damn good. Josh Jacobs is going to have to shine as a bell cow running back once again. I like what I see with Marshawn Lloyd. I like knowing you have Emmanuel Wilson if you need him in a pinch and what he serves as a third running back on a roster. And maybe Chris Brooks makes the team too, and they run with 4 running backs. Josh Jacobs is still going to be the bell of the ball for Green Bay when it comes to the ground game. You look at what Ben Sermons, the running backs coach for Green Bay, echoed earlier this offseason a couple of months ago back in May. I mean, just singing the praises of Josh Jacobs. I'm going to read a quote here, but it's what he said at the end that kind of nailed home this point for me. Ben Sermons, the running backs coach for Green Bay, said 2 months ago about Josh Jacobs, and I quote, "The guy's a dog. Not just the way he carries the ball, also just his presence. being around really good running backs, they have a presence about them on the field that kind of permeates throughout the team through their gameplay as well as when they're in the locker room. Because besides the quarterback, you're touching the ball as a running back probably more than anybody else out there. So you can affect the emotions of the team more than anybody else. And he's talking about Jacobs, he's been everything that we would hope for, and he is the engine for us offensively. Not the quarterback. This is not a knock on Love. This is just putting that light on Josh Jacobs. Calling, not the running back room, not the running back group that they have, calling Josh Jacobs specifically the engine of this offense in Green Bay. It's not just coaches either. Aaron Banks, who you paid top dollar for to come over and be your starting left guard, to leave San Francisco, leave the Bay Area, come to Green Bay, after spending his first few years in the league, all with the 49ers, now comes over to the Packers. Aaron Banks noted his own excitement in coming over to Green Bay, and a lot of that having to do with who's in place at running back, more specifically Josh Jacobs. Aaron Banks said this earlier in the offseason about Josh Jacobs, and I quote, "Watching him on tape, the way he can create in his runs and how physical and downhill he is, I think that the running back plays a big part in the success of the run game, not just offensive line, but the two together. So, yeah, I was excited to get the chance to block for him," talking about Josh Jacobs. That's a free agent coming in and wanting to come block for the star running back. That's noteworthy. That's a coach calling that same player the engine of the offense. That's pretty noteworthy. And after what you could call a banner 2024 season, Josh Jacobs has said all offseason he just wants to get better. He talked about leaving meat on the bone in 2024. You know, Green Bay needs Jordan Love to be solid at a minimum at the quarterback position if the goal is to win titles. In the quarterback, we know it's the premier position in the NFL that chews up the headlines, chews up the attention. I get all of that. I'm just offering a different case here. Josh Jacobs might be the most important part of the equation for the Packers and their success in 2025. The numbers, the quotes, the blueprints that LaFleur lays out and runs on offense backs a lot of it up. And so I'm perfectly fine with those who say quarterback's the most important position. Green Bay's quarterback is Jordan Love. Therefore, he's the most important player on this roster. Josh Jacobs, though, you're talking about the guy who led the league in yards after contact, the percentage of his yards coming after contact. You're talking about the Packers who ran it slightly more than they passed it in totality in 2024. You have a coach saying he's the engine of the offense. You have a prized free agent addition to your offensive line talking about one of the biggest reasons he came over and left San Francisco is because he wants to block for that running back. That is Josh Jacobs. All of that stuff, super noteworthy. You have individual performances where you wonder, man, Green Bay probably doesn't win that game if not for Josh Jacobs. And you can look at week 2 against Indianapolis when they passed it 14 times. And what were his numbers? They passed it 14 times, and he ran it 32 for 151 in a 6-point win over the Colts. And a game a few weeks later against Jacksonville where Jordan Love leaves early in the second half, doesn't return. Groin injury, I think it was, wasn't it? Wasn't the MCL, wasn't the elbow injury suffered week 18 against Chicago. I think it was a groin injury. Malik Willis comes in. Green Bay passes it 27 times total. Why only 27 in a 30-27 game? Higher scoring, you would think more passing attempts. Because Josh Jacobs ran it 25 times for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. The lone bright spot on the offense in that playoff loss to Philadelphia, you had Dobbs get hurt, Jaden Reed get hurt, Elton Jenkins get hurt, Glover and Telfort were a revolving door at left guard. Love was pressured, he was sacked. Love wasn't that great, 3 interceptions, no touchdowns. What was the only good takeaway from that play on the offense, from that loss to Philadelphia in the playoffs? Josh Jacobs had 81 rushing yards, 74 came after contact, forced 12 missed tackles, was second on the team in receiving yards with 40, and had the lone touchdown for the offense against a really, really, really good Philadelphia defense. I'm telling you, it's easy to say the quarterback. You go around, who's the most important player on Cincinnati? Joe Burrow. Who's the most important player on Baltimore, Lamar Jackson. Who's the most important player in Kansas City? Well, it's Patrick Mahomes. Some might present cases elsewhere, but you go across the board, 32 teams, most instances you're going to come to the conclusion that, hey, the quarterback's the most important position. Their quarterback's the most important player on the roster. Jordan Love might be that for the Packers, and they need him to be good. But Josh Jacobs, he will tell a lot of the tale for Green Bay when we look back and talk about how good or not good the offense was in 2025. How good or not good the team ended up being in 2025. Because his presence matters that much on the field. His presence matters that much in the locker room. Outside of saying earlier in the offseason that Green Bay needed a true number one wide receiver, which, Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed addressed on Twitter. Outside of that comment, teammates, you can tell, they really circle around Josh Jacobs. They listen to him. He has a big locker room presence. He has a big presence on the field. There might not be a more important player on this roster than Josh Jacobs in 2025. He was that good in 2024. He'll be relied upon to be that big of a presence and that good in 2025. Let me know what you guys and gals think. I'm just offering the flip side of it. Saying, hey, you know what? Jordan Love, yeah, he plays the most important position. Is he the most important player? Probably, but Josh Jacobs might also be in the running to wear that crown for Green Bay in 2025. We'll have to see. Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Always appreciative of all the support. Please click the subscribe button nearing 200. Would love to get there by the start of training camp. We'll see you next time.